How are you? Welcome to Critical Moves of Telesur, an organization that was born to defend the North Atlantic area after World War II from the so-called threat of the USSR, has now has been born for 30 years. On what basis does it work? How has it changed to try to survive, trying to find new enemies and new threats? Are all of the countries, all the member countries, totally allied to them? This is what we're going to be analyzing today. Let's begin. First of all, let's hear the statements of some of the members of NATO during the last summit. We are also celebrating the anniversary, and we have been able to guarantee stability. This is the only place where North America and Europe discuss all of their problems. Their members have been very clear. We're all for one and all for one. What we see is that we're being able to answer to all of the missiles and be defensive. We are still committed to have the disarmament and the non-proliferation. We had good discussions on how we should answer collectively towards Russia. The problems and our challenges of what's happening now in cyberspace, and the challenges that we collectively face, the need to work together and to be able to confront all of our challenges together. Who is the enemy? When did this alliance begin? It was Russia, USSR. Things changed 30 years ago. Today, Russia is a threat in certain areas. It's a threat for the neighboring country. This is the crisis in Ukraine shows it. It is also an ally in many topics in which we do have discussions. I want to thank all of the organization. We will be able to put $400,000 million more, and I would like every country to pay its 2%. The United States has had a disbalance for many years, for decades, in fact, and we are discussing this in this moment. I hope that we can reach an agreement. And what are the points of the London Agreement that was the ending of this meeting? On December 4th, in the UK, there was the Nato meeting. The members approved the London Agreement that has 9 points. The document speaks of how less than 30% of the countries in the world ally to try to prevent any conflicts and link to the founder of NATO, who is US. The members of this organization notified the increase in the investment that is over 130 billion to have more weapons for defense in case of enemy attacks. Now they speak that Russia is a threat, and they do want a dialogue with them. China is a challenge, and after that they have to work hard on defending their cyberspace. After saying that there is no threat, they have recognized all of those who gave their lives for the security beyond their borders, according to their members. The London Agreement ensures that NATO and their allies guarantee the liberties of their members for generations to come. I want to expand a little bit more, and that is why I want to speak about an article that has been written on December 4th, the threats and challenges of NATO in its 70th anniversary. For example, in this declaration, the Allies recognize the threats for everybody should Russia withdraw from the nuclear agreement and the new nuclear missiles that Russia has. China, they're very worried about China, and especially Huawei in building the new networks necessary for the upcoming wireless communication. Washington urges Europe to exclude Huawei in the development of the 5G networks, assuring that they have very close ties to the government of China, and this could be used to spy on behalf of Beijing. Space, they gave a definition on how to understand space. Another website that is going to be useful for our posterior analysis, this is from Telesur. This is on December 4th. NATO closes the summit making fun of Trump and increasing the budget. Mr. Trump canceled the press conference after he had been mocked by a video that leaked. And here you can see a conversation between Justin Trudeau, Boris Johnson, the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, and the Prime Minister of Rutte, who are making fun of the President. In this meeting, there was a fight between these presidents of Macron and Trump, who understated the declarations of France, and he said that these words are not at all positive. I suggest this article that's called The Crisis of Identity of NATO. There is El Periódico EXT. There has been discussions back and forth where we have the figures of Macron and Trump. They both just represent different positions of NATO. While the President of the United States and in general for the Americans, the topic is how to increase the contribution of the budget on behalf of the Europeans. The other part says that it's important. Macron, thinks it's necessary to define objectives and plans of actions. The U.S. planning says that the Russia are the ones who are the major beneficiaries of the existence of NATO, and therefore they should put more money into it. And then there's an answer on behalf of NATO saying that NATO has a crisis of identity. And now the present one is the inefficiency of the organization to answer new organizations that goes beyond what normally they used. There could be maybe a debate if there was equality in the members. There's a climate that is far worse than the one that existed when Trump was president. The single idea that the European Union can promote an autonomous military organization, this has contributed to make the atmosphere even more tense. So let's go with our first pause. We always propose a very interesting question. This is today's. After NATO, with their 70th anniversary, how is it perceived? Is it a necessary military organization against the threats and invasion, or the armed force of the imperialism against the world? We'll be right back. NATO is incredibly destructive. It's bad for the environment. It's incredibly negligent with human rights, especially with the indigenous one. This is an organization that promotes war. It's carrying out a bad role in the world defense, and they contaminate a lot. NATO is responsible. We are not happy with the fact that Donald Trump has been invited for the third time, regardless of the position of the people. Trump is sexist, classist. After saying that they were not going to get involved in our elections, he then says that he prefers Boris Johnson. Let's make a timeline on how NATO has been working. NATO began in April 4th in 1949 in the United States. According to the fundamental charter, is based on the UN Charter that bases the inherent right of the independent countries to the collective defense. After World War II, several countries constructed the idea of a virtual USSR invasion. That is why they looked for the United States, because they had the major military force. US decided to create this transatlantic North Atlantic Treaty Organization. With the disappearance of USSR, NATO would have no sense. However, this did not happen. It operated with major force, and there have been new members that have hopped on to this organization. Nowadays, it is a structure of domination for many countries in terms of security and defense. Many examples show this. In Yugoslavia, in 1999, NATO carried out an operation of Allied force that included launching missiles and bombs over that territory. As a result, there was a destroyed country with 10,200 dead. The troops there has been troops in many countries, with more than 17,000 dead and 30,000 injured. One of the worst things that they did was having destroyed Iraq while they were trying to look for weapons of mass destruction. Their pass through Bosnia and Kosovo was also terrible. In this territory, there were 102 attacks with missiles. It is thought that NATO launched tons of toxic waste. As a complement of this context, let's go to a geopolitical map. NATO, Strategic Military Alliance. The organization was founded on April 4th in 1949, and it is guided by the principles of the Treaty of Washington. Their members will defend any fellow member. The headquarters in Brussels, in Belgium. However, in other parts of the world, 29 nations collaborate with the organization within their Association for the Peace. In 2017, the combined military expenditure was 52% of the world budget in that topic. They have a Council of NATO, where each one of the members have a delegation and a permanent envoy. They have decision-making power. Then the whole assembly is guided by the General President. The assembly is every year, and they interact with the parliamentary framework of each country. The military committee is the one who guides the military actions. This committee will advise the assembly, and for this, the main leaders of the militaries get together. NATO has had several questioning on actions of the previous year. The main countries that have been criticized have been the UK, and for example, the fact of what happened in Libya after they invaded and they killed Muammar al-Gaddafi, its president. If you're just joining us, you might understand why we're moving forward in NATO. Well, in London, there are 9 points in this agreement that have prevailed over 9 decades of this organization. This document that has at least 30% of the countries, and in the majority, they speak of the main founder of NATO, which is the United States. The members of NATO have notified the increase in the investment in the defense subject. That is more than $130 billion. So they can facilitate the operations in case they're an attack on behalf of China. And they say that they're a threat for the Euro-Atlantic stability. They do have the opening to speak and establish a dialogue with Russia. And about China, they say that there is a threat on their behalf because of all of the technological developments they have, especially that of the 5G. These are elements that we should talk to. For this, I have Ari Aliortua, and from Spain. Hi, welcome to our Critical Moves. And let's go to a general question, and then we go to a particular question. In your opinion, how is NATO getting to 70 years? Well, it arrives in a peculiar way. First of all, we must say that all of the news media are trying to make a cartoon out of Trump, and it's true that he himself does a good work. But it is true that Trump has made but the other countries have felt compelled to increase their investment. This military intervention has been able to increase the quotas of the countries. And let's not forget that the member countries have also collaborated with them in territory people. Now we have how the police of NATO. Do you agree? Yes, totally. We could understand this in an organization that is a mafia or maybe a pyramid scheme. You could understand it. But in a normalization, back in 1949, it was made in a defensive manner. And let's say that was selflessness. And now we see that reality is far from this theory. It's acting like a police in the interests and also as a vanguard. In the elite and the political, economic, and military elite, both for the working class and the high class. So we're not speaking of a defensive coalition, but this is a military vanguard that is used as an aggressor of different countries all throughout the government, the globe. Nowadays we see it with the fight against the Islamic terrorism. The Islamic terrorism is one of the
la presunta amenaza que representa para estos países del Atlántico Norte, aunque eso entre comillas, porque
and we know that these countries that are associated, that are beyond the Atlantic, and now they receive the threats, which should be Russia and China. Well, in this summit of London, they have been reaffirming it. They've reaffirmed the idea that they are an organization that only looks after the security and the peace of their allies. But they have made a strong correlation, which is that Russia and China do want the peace, just precisely when the policies are more hostile than ever, both in terms of China as well as for China. For example, they were talking about their purpose in not creating more weapons. This, of course, if China and Russia however, what they don't say, and obviously we can take it, is that the United States is the one who unilaterally has withdrew from the agreements.
La administración del presidente Trump ha sido quien las ha unilateralmente, igual que llegó a romper el tratado de
just like they broke the treaty, now they're trying to go after Iran. And they think that there might be a threat for the upcoming years. In all of the declarations that we have been able to listen, they are threatening China. And this for the security of the resources. I guess we could understand each other. Maybe in the short term or in the long term, maybe they're going to be a force but right now they're aiming at joining forces. They spoke of the UK and the Chinese destabilization efforts. And they have killed the strategic domain.
posiciones a defender, han hablado del espacio, del ciberespacio, y luego
And they're
que,
speaking also about
los mares,
cyberspace.
la tierra y demás hasta ahora, pero hoy ya sí que ha entrado pues, estos nuevos dominios con fuerza y han declarado pues, su precisión a defenderla de cualquier manera.
Ahora, Aritz, no ponen en la misma balanza los Estados miembros de la
Now,
OTAN
the
a
member
Rusia y China,
the member countries
rememorando
don't put
el
in the
sonido
same
que ha
level,
replicado varios
China
medios de
or
prensa
Russia.
del presidente Emmanuel Macron.
Now
Él se
that Emmanuel
preguntaba,
Macron
¿quién es el
says,
enemigo
who is the
hoy?
enemy
Cuando se creó la
nowadays?
alianza, la
When
respuesta era
the
simple:
alliance was
Rusia, la
created, it
URSS.
was easy.
Las
It was
cosas cambiaron
USSR.
hace
Things
30
changed
años.
30 years
Hoy
ago.
Rusia es una
Now,
amenaza en ciertos temas y
Russia
muchos
is a
enfrentamientos en actividades
threatened
cibernéticas, en ciertos temas
in
específicos
some
también
specific
se han venido
topics.
cambiando. Es una amenaza, Rusia dice, para los países
And
cercanos.
for
La
Russia,
crisis
it
de
says it's for
Ucrania lo demuestra, dice Macron. También es un vecino geográfico y eso
it's
también es
also
cierto.
a
Es
neighbor.
un socio en varios
It's
temas sobre los que estamos
it's an
teniendo
ally in
discusiones. O sea,
many
que como el mismo
aspects.
Macron
And
reconoce
as
que
Macron
para los
says,
países de la
for
OTAN,
the
Rusia
NATO
se convierte en
countries,
una
Russia
presunta
is an
amenaza. Por otro lado,
alleged
como que
threat.
afloja y dice,
On the other
bueno,
hand, he
pero
says,
es
well,
un socio estratégico
he's a
con el que hay que
strategic ally
sentarse
with which
a
you have to sit
dialogar.
and
¿Por qué
dialogue.
le baja
Why
voz, como dijéramos aquí en
do
Venezuela,
they
el
subtract to
presidente de Francia,
the
que
president
además
of
se ha
France?
convertido en la antítesis
And he
de
has now
Donald
become
Trump
the
en organismos
antithesis of Donald
internacionales
Trump
como este, la Organización del Tratado
in
del
world
Atlántico
organizations such as
Norte, digo,
these?
al referirse a Rusia.
Bueno, pues porque saben bien del interés que tiene en este caso.
Well, this is because of
Europa,
the interest that
mantenerse
Europe
bien con
has
sus vecinos
to get
y en
along well
especial,
with its neighbors
con la Federación Rusa.
and with the
Es,
Russian
uno de los
Federation.
principales suministradores
It's one of the
de
main
recursos energéticos
suppliers
de
of
Europa.
energy of
De ahí
Europe.
que no tiene ningún sentido
And this is
que
why it makes no
veamos que
sense
si la Unión Europea,
that the European
bueno,
Union,
que hace referencia a nuestro bienestar, ¿no? A la gente que vivimos aquí
and this has to
en
do
Europa,
with our well-being of the people who live
si
here in Europe.
realmente fuese ese la meta o el goal,
And
¿no?
let's see that the main target,
Pues la soberanía de los pueblos de Europa, el bienestar de su gente,
the well-being of these
y la del
people,
entorno, que es en teoría pues a lo que hace referencia
and
los
apparently that is
estatutos
feasible,
fundacionales, pero luego la realidad es muy diferente y Europa,
then the reality is totally
sigue
different.
a
And
pies
Europe,
juntillas, salvo pues contada ocasión,
it's time
las
to
directrices que
reconsider.
marca Estados Unidos, que está a miles de kilómetros de por ejemplo,
Let's
una
not forget
frontera
that
con
they are
Rusia,
thousands of
que,
miles
pues,
against
los tratados
from the
energéticos que tiene no tienen nada que
they
ver,
keep these
ni las
these
necesidades
socks,
que tienen no tienen
and
nada que
they
ver
have
con
nothing
las
to do
necesidades
with
que
the
Europa
necessities that
tiene en
Europe
este ámbito y no tiene ningún
has, and
sentido,
it
pues,
makes no
el
sense.
posicionamiento que muestra
This
Europa
position
más
that
allá
France is
de
trying
alguna
to
y otra
show,
declaración
except for
presidente
one or the
Macron,
other
porque sí que es
declarations
verdad
of Emmanuel
que es un
Macron.
poco una especie de freno o contrabalance a las declaraciones de
And
Estados
this
Unidos,
is
¿no?
this
A día de
problem
hoy,
has also
aún,
become even worse with the
la
words of the
la
United
marca
States.
Estados Unidos y
Well,
Europa
nowadays
solo la cata, sea con Rusia, sea con China.
the
y sea
problem
con
has
otros
become
países,
more
Lo
profound.
podíamos ver cuando pasó aquel esperpento, ¿no?
We can see
Del
this,
autoproclamado, por ejemplo,
for example, with the recognition of the self-proclaimed Venezuelan President Juan Guaido and the Europe.
Pues el beneplácito de Estados Unidos a esa
And how could they give the authorization to go in to this person?
Cuando la administración Trump decide romper unilateralmente con el pacto nuclear iraní,
And if they decide to cut unilaterally with the Iranian agreement, they said that it was preferable for all the parts.
Por el bien de la humanidad en general, pero luego, pues bajo mesa o
Then beneath the table,
Europa viene a ahondar en las sanciones contra la República Islámica de Irán, ahondar contra las
and now they ask to go
criminales contra la población
against the
civil,
civil
y viene a
population.
ser, no diría un vasallo
I would
de
not
las
say that it's a
directrices
puppet
estadounidenses,
of the US,
pero sí,
but
digamos, de una manera así un poco suave,
in a soft way, let's say that it's benevolent.
Aritz, por último,
Aritz,
quiero someter
to
análisis
finish,
contigo, dedicarle un
let's
par de minutos a
analyze
un
the
tema
following.
que ha pasado así como inadvertido, ¿no?
Yes.
Pero no deja de tener importancia capital. Cuando se refieren al
When they're
espacio
speaking
exterior,
about the
los
foreign
mandatarios
space,
confirmaron a través
the
de esta declaración de
Europeans
Londres
speak of
que el espacio
how the
es un área
space is an
operativa de la OTAN
operative
también
area
y se une
of
a
NATO
lo que ya
too.
tienen.
And they
Aire,
add to what they
tierra,
have,
mar y
air,
ciberespacio.
water, and
¿Qué
cyberspace.
pretende ahora la OTAN?
What does NATO pretend
Lanzarse a la
now?
reconquista del espacio exterior que años ha
And this
mantenían
happens
como cierta
for
competencia Estados Unidos y
to
la
let
Unión
them
Soviética.
use.
Sí, para mí también es uno de los puntos más importantes. Ayer cuando estaba escuchando las intervenciones en directo,
I was
fue
listening to
una de las cosas que más
the
me llamó la
conversations, and this is one of the
Y es
things
que
that called
la
my attention.
declaración,
It's that the declaration
es explícita.
is
Marcan la
explicit.
directriz para futuros
It shows the
años
way
y
for
un
the
poquito
upcoming
la
years,
línea, militar
and a little bit of the
de
military
comandancia que van
area.
a seguir, pues la hicieron explícitamente, Marcaron el espacio
So
como
they marked
un
the
ámbito
space
más de la defensa y en este caso de la
as a
agresión.
defense, and
Tenemos que
now
recordar
let's
que
speak
aunque
also of the
teóricamente
aggression.
la organización fue pues creada para
And although they say that the
defensivamente
organization
contra una supuesta
was
amenaza
created
comunista,
to create
realmente
with
luego fue como un freno para el socialismo en Europa. De ahí que después
this is why
del pacto de Varsovia, perdón, pues
after the
regularon un poquito esos
the Poland Pact,
movimientos.
they
De hecho,
regulated these steps.
recibieron en su seno a
In fact, they received,
13 países que eran ex pacto de Varsovia.
and they used to be
Y de ahí,
the Varsovia
pasamos
Pact,
al-
and
a la
then
amenaza
we go to
islamista,
the Islamic
donde hemos visto,
force. And
mencionabais
here we've
antes,
seen
creo, pues, la invasión a Yugoslavia, la invasión a Afganistán, pero ha habido un sinfín de
Let's say that there have
agresiones
been
no
many
igual tan
aggressions,
conocidas como podían
maybe
ser,
not well known
pues, Sudán,
as the ones in
Somalia,
Sudan, Somalia,
incluso hoy por hoy, ¿no? El Yemen, o unos años atrás, Libia, ¿no? Y además es
and
curioso
some
por
years
este
ago
punto
Libya.
que decía
And it's
del-
interesting because this
del
point,
dominio del espacio
speaking
también,
about the
del-
domination
del
of the
espacio,
airspace and the
apuntaban claramente
cyber airspace,
a una
it-
posible amenaza a China, o una
and this could happen like
coalición chino-rusa, ¿no? Entonces están apuntando claramente dónde va a ser su
and they're
choque o
aiming where
conflicto de
the
intereses
the
de
conflict
ambos,
of interest will be
bloques,
of both
y-
blocks,
y ya
and
están pues un poquito marcando
they are
esa
already
directriz. Y con lo que estaba
where
diciendo,
you mark
también
it.
me
So what
resultó muy
Wazada
curioso
was
que,
saying is it's very
cuando
interesting to
comentaron
see.
esto, hilaron directamente con las amenazas
You went
directas que
directly
tiene
to the threats,
el eje pues anglo-europeo, ¿no?
and this shows how much
Y
terror there could
hicieron
be.
mención a la
And this
amenaza
made-
rusa, de expansión a las fronteras europeas,
And the expansion
pero
to the
luego
European
también,
coast.
hicieron
But then also,
mención a la
they spoke
inseguridad
about the
de los
insecurity
países,
of the countries.
Colindantes o vecinos de Europa que hacen que la inmigración ilegal
And now we
sea,
see that the
pues,
illegal
una amenaza
immigration is now a
para las
threat.
sociedades occidentales. Y es gracioso
And it's
porque
funny to
hacían
see.
clara referencia a Libia, que Libia está sumida en una situación de caos.
And now we see
pero
that
que,
Libya is in a
pues,
chaos
me
situation.
pareció
What happens
lamentable
is that it seems awful.
Si no fuese muy grave, pues,
And it wasn't
hasta
that bad.
gracioso, es que Libia la destruyeron pues los mismos miembros de la OTAN.
And
que
Libya
ahora
was
dicen
destroyed
que
by NATO
Libia es un
themselves.
caos y
And
es
they
una
say that
amenaza, pues, para los pueblos de África y
that
para
Libya
los pueblos
is a threat for
europeos.
Europe.
Pero Libia, que era el
But
país
Libya, that used to be the
sustento
country
más próspero de la África, la destruyeron pues esta coalición que en teoría era defensiva.
that in theory was is a defensive organization, and everything is just to get more money and energy
Ahora se
routes.
quieren pintar como víctimas de un caos. que
Now
ellos
they
mismos
want to paint
crearon.
themselves
Aritz,
as a
como
victim of
siempre,
a
me alegra
chaos.
muchísimo
As
dialogar
always,
contigo,
Aritz, thank you for being
a
with
través
us.
de esta vía y la jugada crítica además. Hasta muy pronto.
Gracias.
Aritz Ola Urtua nos estaba acompañando.
Ola
desde
Urtua was
España.
with us from
Marcamos
Spain.
pausa
Let's go to a
nuevamente en la jugada
pause
crítica, pero en la
and
jugada
we'll be
estratégica.
right back.
En Twitter usted puede responder, puede participar. Ahí la tenemos. Tras arribar la OTAN a su aniversario 70, ¿cómo es percibida esta alianza guerrerista? ¿Como una necesaria organización militar
How
contra
is it now
amenazas e
seen?
invasiones?
Is it
¿O como el brazo
a threat,
armado del imperialismo en el mundo?
or is it the armed
Opine
force
después de la
of the
pausa.
West against the world?
Seguimos el análisis.
We'll be right back.
Ya que entramos en el área
Since we're speaking of the
nos preguntamos qué
geopolitics,
papel
we ask
juega la
ourselves,
OTAN
what is the role of
en una
NATO
vez más multipolar.
now that it's multipolar? Nowadays, NATO is the armed force of the imperialism. The hegemony is in hands of the US and in the less degree of the European allies. In a world that is mostly multipolar, with growing forces just as China and Russia, US uses it as a threat, as an advancement against the threats of the increasing countries. Experts say that all of the trainings that are being held in the world are just an answer to the countries to the things of what Putin is doing. Another thing is how other countries are coming into NATO, like Colombia, and their association makes it a clear threat for the neighboring Venezuela. Being member of this means that they will have more information and more training on cybersecurity. The first tie between NATO and Colombia was with President Uribe, and it finished with the signing of an agreement with Juan Manuel Santos. It has also been used to pressure countries that are not aligned. For example, in the north of Africa, with the invasion of Libya, under those alleged reasons of defending human rights, they finished up with fresh water sources, which brought terrible humanitarian consequences. Nowadays, apart from its capacities, both in air, water, and land, they said that they will attack should there be any hybrid attack. This is what James Stoltenberg said. So this means that it's clear what defenses they are on what side they're on. Here we have a small correction. In 2013, it was a different president in Colombia. Now we're going to speak from Spain, Juan Luis González Pérez. I want to greet you. Let's see, NATO with a macro-politic vision. And for this, it's necessary to speak about their global allies. What repercussion do you think this will have? Well, it's interesting how NATO, that is an organization that was born to operate in the North Atlantic, and now it's trying to expand all the time, and they're trying to control the natural resources, the strategic resources of all of the planet. Now they have as an enemy China, and they decide to incorporate Colombia, which is one of the worst governments of the world, and now they have it as a strategic ally. What they're probably going to do is use it against Venezuela, who is trying to fight to keep their sovereignty. We see how the United States is offering many things to try to control everything that is happening in Latin America. They're trying to what they're trying to do is trying to put an end to any popular and progressive governments to reach power. Juan Luis, how can we understand this when NATO says that one of their principles is to defend and it's not offensive? Well, this is something that has never been so. In fact, part of its propaganda, it's just part of a propaganda. For example, what happened to OTAN and NATO in Yugoslavia, in Somalia. It's a belligerent organization, and I would even call it terrorist because it's the major terrorist group in the world. And what they're trying to do is take over the natural resources of these small countries. And there are multiple proof for this. Now, you're speaking about something really important. And I would like to speak about the fight against terrorism. We're speaking that NATO has members, leader members, founder members, that are the creators of the Islamic State. And now they say that one of the reasons why they should still be alive is to fight against extremist groups like ISIS or Islamic State. How do you understand this? This is a contradiction. Of course, this is what we call the propaganda, which is another of the places where the war is ongoing against the world. It's obvious that NATO, just to justify their existence, needs to have an enemy. And once that USSR has disappeared, well, Russia is no longer an enemy. When Russia starts to wake up and have some leadership in the world, well, now this apparently is not enough. Let's invent a new enemy, like the one from the jihad. And then we have the association with China and the US. Anybody with a little bit of criteria can see that the US was the one who created the ISIS and other jihadist organizations. And that they have been using it as mercenaries. In that moment, Al-Qaeda is born. And in Syria, where their leadership has been even much stronger. So now we see that the excuse for invading Mali, we see that a lot of force was used by the US, but it wasn't necessary. And of course, the government of the moment did not ask for that aggression. And once a country that was going to be invaded, the jihadist groups had disappeared. This is the strategy they use. Well, United States and these terrorist groups use them conveniently when they need them. And every time that they don't want them, they bring up the assassination of one of the leaders. Juarez, I also want to reflect on a topic that has been reflected as a small note, not something that's so relevant, but they're speaking about the breakage between NATO. Just for example, Mr. Trudeau, Macron having a confronting position to that of the United States president. What does this show? Are they really together? Are they committed in this alliance? Or are these cracks even more profound than what we see? Is it that we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg? Well, I think that this show, that the summit, has been a total disaster, and that NATO is in a cul-de-sac. And every time it's pointing more to its disappearance. Some people say that this was a discreet meeting, but it's not so. The truth is that all of the major steps have been cleared up. We even saw how Macron and Trudeau were laughing. And they even tried to bite his own tongue. I think that NATO has been aging not well, and we see how it's probably obsolete and maybe reaching its end. Macron went as far as saying that they're in cerebral death, and the internal division is very strong too. The division between the European allies is very strong. And the final agreement is important, and I think that this will lead to a breakage sooner than later. However, when we see the Declaration of London, it says that it will last for decades because there are still some threats in the world. By when do you think we could go to the funerals of NATO? I think it's hard to foresee, but I do think that it's a very important path where Europe is waking up. I think now there's a breach, a transatlantic breach. And I think it's not even a coincidence. Now that he has a very bad way of governing with a lack of diplomacy. However, Europe is understanding that Trump has no right to base his defense on the weapons. They can also go through the diplomacy field. And we have that Canada has to work together because they're neighbors. And what the United States is trying to do is to put a line in Europe to create enemies among themselves. And because they want to have an ally in Europe. They have given their first steps. We've got some timid steps towards this collective conscience and against NATO. As always, thank you very much, Juan Luis, for your presence. See you soon. Juan Luis González Pérez was with us from Spain. Now it's time to go to our conclusions. It has been 70 years after the creation of NATO. Although the admission of new allies says that their defensive structure has expanded through the world, the so-called threat is now Russia of Putin and the China of Xi Jinping. They justify it with the need of taking care of each other. However, there are some differences internally. It's basically the United States against the rest. 70 years has reached this organization that is famous, that is infamous for all the bad things they did. Now the question is, who is the real threat? Let's close our screen for today. See you tomorrow.